From the bone-dry deserts of the Giza Plateau to the mist-shrouded peaks of the Andes, silent stone sentinels stand watch over the passage of millennia. Carved into the very bedrock of our world, there are structures that whisper of an impossible past. They are vast, enigmatic, and they endure with a permanence that defies both time and explanation. Conventional archaeology tells us a clear, concise story. These are the works of nascent civilizations taking their first bold steps onto the world stage. They are temples to forgotten gods, tombs for powerful kings, and calendars to mark the passing of the seasons. Their grandest ambitions, we are told, were realized through the sweat of 1,000 brows, with copper chisels, stone hammers, and an unwavering devotion that moved mountains one block at a time. It is a narrative of human ingenuity triumphing over primitive conditions. A simple, elegant, and satisfying explanation. And yet, when we look closer, the simple story begins to fracture. When we run our hands over the impossibly smooth surfaces of diorite and granite, when we measure the perfect right angles and laser-like cuts in stone too hard for simple tools to shape, the official narrative feels incomplete. We are confronted with colossal blocks of stone weighing tens, even hundreds of tons, quarried and transported across miles of impossible terrain, then lifted and placed with a precision that would challenge our most advanced modern cranes. We discover acoustic chambers that resonate at specific, mind-altering frequencies, and celestial alignments so perfect they track cosmic cycles across thousands of years. These are not the hallmarks of brute force. They are the fingerprints of a mastery that seems jarringly out of place, anachronistic. This forces us to ask a difficult, perhaps even dangerous question. Are we looking at the humble beginnings of a primitive science, or are we seeing the faint, fading echoes of its forgotten apex? What if these ancient builders were not simply devout, but were instead brilliant? What if they were the inheritors of a profound and sophisticated knowledge, a science based on principles of vibration, frequency, and geology that we are only just beginning to rediscover? A science that could liquefy stone, levitate massive objects, and engineer the very consciousness of those who entered their sacred spaces. This is not an isolated phenomenon. This architectural DNA, this signature of impossible precision, is found across the globe, separated by vast oceans and millennia of time. From the Cyclopean walls in Peru, to the subterranean boxes in Egypt, to the star-aligned monoliths of prehistoric Europe. It is a silent, global testimony, hinting at a shared primordial inheritance, a lost chapter in the human story, deliberately ignored or simply forgotten. These ruins are not just places of worship. They are artifacts of a forgotten science, a technology so advanced it is indistinguishable from magic. To begin to unravel this enigma, we must journey back, further back than any historian thought possible, to a place that single-handedly rewrites the timeline of civilization, a structure so old it should not exist. We must travel to the dawn, before the dawn, where the first and perhaps most profound of these stone riddles awaits.
In the wind-swept plains of southeastern Anatolia, under the vast, silent sky, lies a secret held for 12 millennia. It is a place the locals call Göbekli Tepe, the pot-bellied hill. For centuries, it was just another feature of the landscape, a rounded prominence on the horizon, its true nature unsuspected by the farmers who tilled the soil around it. But beneath its gentle slope, an impossibility was sleeping. An ancient structure so old, so complex, and so profoundly out of place that its discovery didn't just add a new chapter to the story of human civilization. It demanded the entire book be rewritten from the very first page. What archaeologists unearthed here, beginning in the mid-1990s, was not a simple settlement or a primitive shrine. It was a sprawling, sophisticated complex of megalithic stone circles. Enclosures of immense, T-shaped pillars, some standing over 18 feet tall and weighing up to 50 tons, were arranged in deliberate, ritualistic patterns. They are colossal, otherworldly figures, their limestone surfaces covered in exquisitely carved reliefs of fearsome predators and enigmatic symbols. Vultures, scorpions, lions, and serpents twist and snarl across the stone, a menagerie from a forgotten world. This is the oldest known temple on Earth, a monumental creation that predates the Great Pyramid of Giza by 7,000 years and predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. It is a masterpiece of prehistoric architecture, a testament to a deep spiritual worldview, and according to the mainstream historical narrative, it should not exist. The accepted timeline of human progress is a simple, linear story we have been told for generations. Humanity begins as scattered bands of nomadic hunter-gatherers. Then, around 10,000 years ago, we invent agriculture. This agricultural revolution allows for permanent settlements, which grow into villages, then towns, and finally the first great cities of Mesopotamia. It is only after the stability of farming and urban life that we develop complex society, organized religion, writing, and monumental architecture. The story is logical, it is sequential. First comes agriculture, then comes the temple. The discoverer of Göbekli Tepe, the late and brilliant German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, initially interpreted the site within this framework, calling it a cathedral on a hill. He theorized that it was a central meeting point, a place of pilgrimage for nomadic hunter-gatherer groups from across the region. They would, he argued, periodically convene here to engage in complex rituals, to feast, and to cooperate on this massive, multi-generational construction project. In this view, the sheer effort required to build Göbekli Tepe may have been the very catalyst that forced humanity to innovate, to develop agriculture simply to feed the legions of workers required to build it. It's a compelling theory, one that flips the old narrative on its head. The temple came first. But a closer look at the stones, at the sheer scale and precision of the site, reveals a cascade of uncomfortable questions. Questions that stretch the mainstream explanation to its breaking point and open the door to a far more mysterious past. The first and most profound is the paradox of labor. Monumental construction requires a massive, coordinated workforce, a stable food supply, and a complex social hierarchy to manage the project. How could a society of scattered, non-sedentary hunter-gatherers, living a hand-to-mouth existence, possibly organize and sustain such an effort for centuries? Where did the food come from to feed the hundreds, perhaps thousands of workers needed to quarry, transport, and erect these 50-ton megaliths? The archaeological record shows no evidence of large-scale farming, no permanent domesticated animals, no nearby cities to support such a population. The very foundation of the project, a reliable surplus of food and a settled society, simply wasn't there. We are asked to believe that nomadic tribes, with no prior experience in construction, spontaneously decided to build the most astonishing structure of their age for reasons we can only guess at. It's an achievement without a precedent, a cultural explosion that seems to come from nowhere. Then there's the engineering enigma. The pillars of Göbekli Tepe were not crude, unfinished rocks. They are elegant, stylized representations of humanoid figures with carved arms, hands, and belts. They were hewn from limestone quarries over a mile away, using nothing more supposedly than primitive flint and basalt tools. Think of it, chipping away at a solid bedrock of limestone, carving out a 50-ton block with perfect right angles, and then somehow transporting it over uneven terrain. How is this accomplished? Without the wheel, without beasts of burden,
without metal tools. How were these monoliths moved and then lifted into their upright positions with millimeter precision? The level of planning, geometry, and raw physical power required is staggering. It hints at a command of logistics and engineering that seems utterly at odds with the Stone Age label. And the artistry. The carvings are not the simple graffiti of primitive minds. They are sophisticated, symbolic, and charged with meaning. The animals depicted are almost exclusively male, and they are not the gentle herbivores the people hunted, but dangerous predators. This was not a gallery of their daily diet. It was a pantheon of powerful, perhaps terrifying cosmic symbols. Some pillars feature abstract symbols, pictograms that could represent an early proto-writing system. This wasn't just a building, it was a library of knowledge, a message carved in stone. What cosmology, what complex system of belief did these people possess that it required such an immense and permanent expression? Perhaps the most startling discovery of all lies not on the ground, but in the stars. Researchers have found that the central pillars of some enclosures appear to be aligned with specific points on the horizon, marking the setting of key stars like Deneb in the constellation Cygnus. One pillar in particular, known as the Vulture Stone, has sent shockwaves through the academic world. It appears to be a celestial timestamp, a snapshot of the sky, as it was around 10,950 BC. The arrangement of animals on the stone perfectly matches the arrangement of specific constellations, and a headless man is thought to symbolize a great catastrophe. More astonishingly, some researchers believe the stone is a detailed record of the Younger Dryas impact event, a cataclysmic comet strike that plunged the world into a mini ice age and caused mass extinctions. Could it be that the builders of Göbekli Tepe were not just primitive shamans, but masterful astronomers, survivors of a global disaster, using their temple to record a history and a warning for all time?
This leads to the most baffling mystery of all. After nearly 2,000 years of construction and use, the people of Göbekli Tepe did something inexplicable. They deliberately and carefully buried their entire creation. Ton by ton, they filled in every enclosure with debris, dirt, and stone, preserving the temple beneath an artificial hill. Why? Why would a society spend centuries, countless generations, erecting their most sacred site only to entomb it? It is an act of cultural sacrifice with no known parallel. Was it to protect it? To hide it? Or was it a final ritual, a closing of a cosmic chapter as their world came to an end? These profound anomalies have led some researchers, operating on the fringes of conventional thought, to propose a radical alternative. What if Göbekli Tepe was not the work of local hunter-gatherers at all? What if, as writers like Graham Hancock have suggested, it is the fingerprint of a much older and far more advanced, lost civilization? A civilization that was wiped from the earth by the Younger Dryas cataclysm, and whose few survivors, scattered across the globe, attempted to restart the human story. In this view, Göbekli Tepe is not a beginning, but an echo, a transfer of knowledge from a forgotten golden age built to preserve sacred science and astronomical data for a future amnesiac humanity. It was a message in a bottle, cast into the deep ocean of time. This temple before its time forces us to confront a history that is deeper, more complex, and infinitely more mysterious than we have ever been taught. It is the Genesis anomaly, a structure that stands in defiant contradiction to our neat and tidy timelines. It proves beyond any doubt that a people we once dismissed as primitive possessed a sophisticated understanding of engineering, art, astronomy, and symbolism that we are only now beginning to comprehend. They were not simple, they were simply ancient. The stones of Göbekli Tepe are a silent rebuke to our modern arrogance. They ask us to question everything we think we know about our own origins. Who were these master builders? What great knowledge did they possess, and where did it come from? And what was the ultimate purpose of this enigmatic temple buried deliberately before the dawn of history?
waiting patiently for a future generation to find it and to finally ask the right questions. The message of Göbekli Tepe is that our story is far older than we can imagine, but its secrets are not only buried under the earth of the Fertile Crescent. Thousands of miles away and thousands of years later in the timeline, another group of builders would leave behind an even more baffling enigma, one written not just in the scale of their structures, but in the impossible surgical precision of the stones themselves.
High in the Altiplano of modern-day Bolivia, nearly 13,000 feet above sea level, the air is thin and the light is unforgivingly clear. Here, under a piercing blue sky, lie the scattered and shattered remains of a site that defies logic, a place that whispers of an impossible history. This is PUMA PUNKU. To walk among its ruins is to walk through the wreckage of a dream. Intricately carved blocks of andesite and diorite lie strewn across the arid plateau, like the discarded components of a giant cosmic machine. These are not the crude stacked stones of a primitive culture. They are objects of breathtaking complexity and precision. H-shaped blocks with interlocking grooves, surfaces polished to a mirror shine, and interior corners cut to perfect right angles. A few hundred miles away, nestled in the hills above Cusco, Peru, lies its enigmatic cousin, SACSAYHUAMÁN. Here, the style is different, but the mystery is the same. Instead of geometric precision, we find organic, cyclopean power. Megalithic blocks of limestone, some weighing over 150 tons, are fitted together like pieces of a colossal jigsaw puzzle. Their shapes are polygonal, complex, with dozens of interlocking faces. There is no mortar, there is only stone, fitted to stone with a seamlessness so perfect that not even a human hair can pass between them. These two sites, PUMA PUNKU and SACSAYHUAMÁN, stand as silent stone witnesses to an engineering prowess that simply should not exist in our established timeline of the past. They are the enduring scars of impossible tools. The mainstream archaeological narrative provides us with a clear, if simple, explanation. PUMA PUNKU, we are told, is the monumental heart of the great Tiwanaku civilization, constructed somewhere between 500 and 1000 AD. SACSAYHUAMÁN is attributed to the later but equally impressive Inca Empire, built as a fortress citadel in the 15th century. According to the accepted timeline, these incredible structures were hewn from their quarries and shaped using these simple tools available to these cultures: heavy stone hammers for quarrying and pounding, and small, soft bronze chisels for the finer work. The immense labor was provided by tens of thousands of workers who, through sheer force of will and generations of effort, dragged these colossal stones from quarries miles away and painstakingly pounded them into shape. It is a testament, we are taught, to human ingenuity and the power of collective effort in the absence of advanced technology. It is a story of manpower over mountains. But is it the true story? The moment we look closer, the moment we move past the museum placards and apply the cold, hard lens of modern engineering and geology, the official narrative begins to crumble into dust. The problems are not small inconsistencies. They are fundamental scientific impossibilities.
Let us begin with the very material these builders were working with. The stones at PUMA PUNKU are primarily gray andesite and black diorite. On the Mohs scale of mineral hardness, where a diamond is a 10, these stones register between a 6 and a 7. They are incredibly hard, dense volcanic rock. The bronze chisels supposedly used by the Tiwanaku people have a Mohs hardness of around 3.5. To suggest that a soft bronze tool could be used to carve, shape, and create intricate, sharp-angled designs in a stone more than twice its hardness is not just a stretch, it is a violation of the basic principles of physics. It would be like trying to carve a granite countertop with a copper butter knife. The tool would be destroyed long before it ever left a meaningful mark upon the stone. And what marks they are! The blocks at PUMA PUNKU are not merely shaped, they exhibit a level of precision that many modern fabrication shops would struggle to replicate. we find perfectly planar surfaces, flat to within fractions of a millimeter. We find grooves just millimeters wide, cut to a uniform depth for their entire length. Most baffling of all are the drill holes. The site is littered with evidence of holes drilled clean through solid diorite. Some of these holes are long and perfectly cylindrical, indicating the use of a stable, high-speed rotational drill, a tool that simply does not appear in the accepted toolkit of any ancient South American culture. Engineers like Christopher Dunn, who have spent their lives working with advanced machining tools, have analyzed these stones and concluded that the precision and features present are hallmarks of modern machining. The sharp, unerring interior corners and the complex interlocking geometries speak not of hand-pounding, but of powered saws, lathes, and milling machines. Where are the endless piles of shattered bronze chisels that would have been required for such a task? There are none. Where are the telltale, uneven marks of hand tooling? They are absent, replaced by a smooth, almost alien perfection. The enigma only deepens at SACSAYHUAMÁN. While its style is less geometric, its engineering is perhaps even more astounding. The largest stones here are estimated to weigh close to 200 tons, the equivalent of 100 large cars. The official story suggests these were quarried several miles away and dragged up steep mountain slopes by thousands of men. The logistics of such a feat, without wheels, without pulleys, and without draft animals capable of moving such weight, are staggering to contemplate. But transporting the stones is only the first impossibility. The true mystery lies in the fitting. These are not just simple rectangular blocks. They are complex polygonal shapes, some with more than 12 interlocking faces, each cut to match its neighbors with microscopic accuracy. To achieve this today, a team of engineers would use 3D modeling software and laser-guided cutting tools to plan and execute the complex joinery. How could the Inca, or an even earlier culture, have planned these three-dimensional puzzles? How could they have carved the final face of a 100-ton stone to perfectly match the 11 other stones it would touch with no room for error? Pounding the stones together until they fit would shatter them under their own immense weight. The level of planning, precision, and execution on display at SACSAYHUAMÁN speaks of a form of measurement and stone-shaping technology that we cannot explain and cannot, with the supposed tools, replicate. The stones stand silent, their perfect seams a quiet rebuke to our simple explanations.
When a paradigm fails to explain the evidence, we are forced to look beyond it. If stone hammers and bronze chisels are not the answer, then we must ask the forbidden question: what was? One of the most compelling and controversial alternative theories is that these ancient masons possessed a form of lost high technology. This theory posits that the precision cuts, drill holes, and planar surfaces at PUMA PUNKU are exactly what they appear to be, the product of advanced power tools. Perhaps they were diamond-tipped saws, capable of slicing through andesite. Perhaps they were sonic drills that used high-frequency vibrations to cut through rock. These scars, in this view, are not the marks of primitive tools, but the tool paths of a technology so advanced it has been utterly lost to time, leaving only its handiwork behind. Another, equally fascinating theory suggests that the stones were not carved at all, but cast. Researchers like French chemist Joseph Davidovits have proposed that ancient cultures may have mastered a form of geopolymer chemistry. In this scenario, the builders would not have quarried massive solid blocks. Instead, they would have crushed the rock into a powder, mixed it with a binding agent to create a kind of superior ancient concrete, and then poured it into molds on site. This geopolymer theory could explain the impossible precision of PUMA PUNKU's H-blocks, as molds are far easier to make than carving solid diorite. It could also explain the perfect fits at SACSAYHUAMÁN, as each stone could be cast directly against its neighbors, ensuring a flawless seam every time. It is a radical idea,
yet it elegantly solves many of the most persistent engineering riddles these sites present. And then there are the more esoteric theories, rooted in local legends that speak of the power of sound. Ancient Andean traditions contain stories of builders who could make stones light as cork using specific sonic frequencies. While this idea of acoustic levitation may seem like pure fantasy, we are only just beginning to understand the profound effects that sound and vibration can have on the physical world. Could our ancestors have mastered a science of harmonics that allowed them to manipulate and shape multi-ton blocks of stone with an ease we no longer comprehend? These sites, PUMA PUNKU and SACSAYHUAMÁN, are not isolated anomalies. They are a profound South American chapter in a global storybook of megalithic construction. The precision of the H-blocks echoes the perfection found inside the granite boxes of the Serapeum in Egypt. The sheer scale of SACSAYHUAMÁN's walls brings to mind the giant foundation stones of Baalbek in Lebanon. They are all pieces of the same puzzle, a puzzle that points to a worldwide, highly advanced, and catastrophically forgotten civilization. They are fingerprints of the same lost hand. What we see in the high Andes, therefore, are not just architectural wonders. They are profound contradictions etched in stone. They force us to confront the possibility that the linear progression of history, from primitive to advanced, is fundamentally flawed. The evidence here suggests a different story, one of lost peaks of technological achievement in the deep past. The mystery of these sites, PUMA PUNKU and SACSAYHUAMÁN, transcend the simple question of how. They force us to ask, why? Why was such phenomenal effort, such impossible precision required? What purpose demanded a level of perfection that would remain unmatched for millennia? The tools may be lost, but the intent behind their use is an even greater enigma. It is a mystery that takes us away from the quarries and workshops and deeper into the ceremonial heart of the ancient world, into chambers buried deep beneath the earth, where precision and purpose collide in an even more baffling display.
The Egyptian sun beats down upon the Saqqara necropolis, a vast and silent city of the dead. Here, the sands hold the secrets of millennia, whispering tales of pharaohs, pyramids, and forgotten rituals. But beneath the surface, away from the familiar light of the pyramids and temples, lies an entrance, a dark wound in the bedrock that leads not to a tomb of gold and splendor, but to a mystery of stone and shadow. To descend into the Serapeum of Saqqara is to leave the world of the known behind. The oppressive heat of the desert gives way to a cool, cavernous silence. The air grows still, heavy with the weight of the earth above. Tunnels, roughly carved from the living limestone, stretch out into the darkness, a subterranean labyrinth that seems to go on forever. And as your eyes adjust, you see them. Resting in alcoves cut into the rock are sentinels from another time. They are colossal boxes, each carved from a single monolithic block of Aswan granite, some of rose granite, others of diorite, one of the hardest stones on earth. They are immense, giants sleeping in the deep, 25 of them in total. The boxes themselves weigh an estimated 70 tons, and their massive, perfectly fitted lids add another 30. 100 tons of impossibly worked stone resting in an eternal, echoing silence. The sheer scale is breathtaking, but it is not the scale that is the deepest part of the mystery. It is the perfection. The surfaces are polished to a mirror sheen, the edges are sharp, the corners executed with a precision that modern machinists would struggle to replicate. These are not crude sarcophagi. They are masterpieces of engineering that seem utterly alien in their subterranean home. And they present us with a riddle that strikes at the very heart of what we think we know about the ancient world.
According to the annals of mainstream Egyptology, the answer is simple, the case all but closed. The Serapeum, rediscovered in 1851 by the French archaeologist Auguste Mariette, is presented as the final resting place for the sacred Apis bulls. In ancient Egyptian religion, the Apis was no ordinary animal. It was believed to be a living manifestation of the powerful creator god Ptah. A single sacred bull, chosen based on specific divine markings, would live a life of luxury in the temple of Ptah at Memphis. Upon its death, the nation would mourn and the bull would be mummified with all the reverence and ceremony afforded to a pharaoh. It would then be interred in its own monumental sarcophagus within the sacred necropolis of Saqqara.
This explanation seems to fit. Mariette found inscriptions on some of the sarcophagi and on stelae near the entrance, mentioning the Apis cult and pharaohs from the late period, such as Amasis and Cambyses. The narrative is straightforward. For centuries, successive pharaohs commissioned these giant granite boxes to house their deceased bovine gods, entombing them deep within the earth as a sign of devotion. It is the explanation you will find in museums and textbooks the world over. A grand, but ultimately understandable feat of pharaonic piety. But for many, the story ends there. A simple, if grandiose, solution to an ancient riddle. But when we look closer, when we set aside the comforting narrative and look at the cold, hard evidence carved in stone, the official story begins to unravel. And the questions that emerge are far more profound than the answers we have been given. The first, most glaring problem with the bull burial theory is a simple one. When Auguste Mariette finally used explosives to force open the lid of the first sealed sarcophagus, he did not find the pristine mummified remains of a sacred bull. He found the box was almost entirely filled with a strange dark bitumen mixed with countless fragments of shattered rock. There was no revered deity inside. Of the 25 colossal boxes, the vast majority were found completely empty. And the few organic remains that were discovered in the wider complex were a confusing jumble of bones from various animals, nothing to suggest the singular, sacred burials the texts describe. Why go to such extraordinary lengths to create 100-ton containers of impossible precision and then leave them empty? This leads us to the second and perhaps most powerful piece of counter-evidence, the craftsmanship itself. It is one thing to say the ancient Egyptians carved these boxes. It is another thing entirely to explain how. The material is Aswan granite and diorite, registering a 7 or higher on the Mohs scale of hardness. The tools available to the dynastic Egyptians were, as far as we know, copper chisels, bronze saws, and stone pounders or mauls. These tools are simply not capable of working granite with this level of sophistication. Modern engineers and stonemasons who have examined the boxes are baffled. They point to the perfectly flat surfaces, measured to be true to within fractions of a millimeter. They point to the flawless 90-degree angles both inside and out. They point to the inner surfaces, which are often more perfectly polished than the exterior. A feat that would require enormous effort for no aesthetic reason if they were merely to be sealed in the dark forever. Christopher Dunn, an engineer who has spent decades studying these artifacts, has argued that such precision is indicative not of hand tools, but of advanced machining. The surfaces are too flat, the corners too sharp, the symmetry too perfect. To achieve this today would require advanced diamond-tipped cutting tools, computer-aided machinery, and sophisticated measuring equipment. How could a civilization using only soft metals and stone pounders, achieve a level of precision that challenges our own 21st century technology. The tool marks simply don't exist because the tools we believe they used couldn't have made them.
Then there is the staggering logistical problem. Quarrying a 100-ton block of granite is a monumental task in itself. But to then transport it over 500 miles from the quarries in Aswan, likely via the Nile, and then over land, is a feat that defies easy explanation. But the greatest challenge would have been the final step, moving these giants into the necropolis, lowering them down a narrow shaft, and then maneuvering them through the tight, winding corridors of the Serapeum. Some of these tunnels leave only inches of clearance on either side of the boxes. There is no room for large teams of men to pull ropes. The turns are too sharp. The physics of the problem are a nightmare. How do you guide a 100-ton object with such delicacy in such a confined space and place it perfectly within its alcove? The accepted theories of ramps, ropes, and manpower seem wholly inadequate when faced with the sheer physical reality of the site. Finally, we must look again at the inscriptions, the very evidence used to date the Serapeum to the late period. When you examine them closely, a strange discrepancy appears. The inscriptions are often crude, shallow, and poorly carved, as if scratched onto the surface as an afterthought. They stand in stark contrast to the perfect mirror-like finish of the box itself. It is like seeing a masterful Renaissance sculpture with graffiti spray painted on it. This has led many researchers to a startling conclusion. What if the boxes and the inscriptions come from two completely different time periods? What if a later culture, like the dynastic Egyptians of the late period, discovered this ancient subterranean complex already filled with these perfect, enigmatic boxes? Finding these impossible artifacts, they could have attempted to use them for their own purposes, such as for the Apis bull cult, carving their own labels onto a technology they could not replicate, but could only revere. The most compelling evidence for this may be the one failed box left unfinished in a side tunnel. It is made of the same Aswan granite, but its surfaces are rough, its shape is irregular, and it is clearly the product of a failed attempt. It looks exactly like what we would expect to see from an effort using Bronze Age tools. It stands as a silent testament to the vast technological gulf between its own crude form and the sublime perfection of the other 24 boxes. It seems to show us the difference between the inheritors and the original builders. If these were not tombs for bulls, then what were they? To answer this, we must step beyond the conventional into the realm of speculative but compelling possibility. One theory is that we are looking at the products of a lost form of technology. The precision and finish suggest a process far more advanced than simple cutting and polishing. Some have proposed the use of sonic or vibrational technology, the ability to use focused sound frequencies to cut and shape stone. Others suggest a form of energy technology we have yet to rediscover, capable of softening or molding stone as if it were clay. In this view, the boxes are not sarcophagi, they are artifacts. They are pieces of ancient machinery whose function is now lost to us.
This leads to the second question. What was that function? The hermetic seal, achieved by the immense weight and perfect fit of the 30-ton lids, suggests they were designed to contain something, or perhaps to exclude something. Were they resonance chambers, designed to generate or amplify a specific energy or frequency when activated? Were they used in some kind of alchemical or transformative process, requiring a perfectly sealed, vibrationally stable environment? The absolute dedication to precision, especially on the inside, hints at a purpose that was technical and functional, not merely ceremonial. A third, more epic theory sees them as containers of preservation. In a world facing a great cataclysm,
a highly advanced civilization might seek to preserve the most important elements of its existence: knowledge, energy sources, or perhaps even biological specimens. What better way to do so than to create indestructible vaults of granite, bury them deep within the bedrock of the most stable geological plate on the planet, and seal them for an eternity? In this scenario, the Serapeum is not a tomb, but an ark, a time capsule of unimaginable antiquity. The impossible engineering of the Serapeum is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a global pattern, a technological fingerprint that appears in the most unexpected places. We see the same level of precision in the colossal interlocking stones of SACSAYHUAMÁN in Peru. We see it in the intricate machine-like H-blocks of PUMA PUNKU. We see it in the thousands of perfectly carved pre-dynastic stone vases found stored beneath Egypt's step pyramid. Vases carved from granite and diorite with impossibly thin necks, a feat that defies explanation. When viewed together, these artifacts suggest that the dynastic Egyptians, the Incas, and other great civilizations of antiquity may not have been the inventors of this high technology. Instead, they may have been the inheritors of a much older legacy. They may have built their civilizations quite literally on the foundations of a forgotten, far more advanced predecessor, a global culture that vanished in the mists of prehistory, leaving behind only these indestructible, enigmatic clues. The Serapeum, then, may be one of their greatest surviving monuments. So we are left standing in the silent darkness of this subterranean world, faced with a choice. Do we accept the simple story of sacred bowls, despite the mountain of contradictory evidence? Or do we dare to ask a more profound question? We are looking at 100-ton boxes of machined perfection, a feat of engineering that remains unexplained. They were not tombs in any conventional sense. They are something else. What secrets were these granite vaults truly designed to protect? And what forgotten science was wielded by the hands that shaped them? The mystery of the Serapeum forces us to look again at the very materials our ancestors worked with. It suggests that stone itself was not just a medium for building, but a medium for something more, a canvas for a technology that could shape mountains as easily as clay. For our next piece of evidence, we journey to a place where an entire temple was not built up, but carved down from a single living mountain. In the sun-scorched, arid landscapes of Maharashtra, India, lies a complex of rock-cut caves that have astonished travelers for centuries. Here, carved into the Charananandri hills, Buddhist, Hindu, and Jain monks chiseled their faith into the living rock. But among these 34 remarkable caves, one stands apart. It is not a cave at all. It is a cosmic enigma. Known as Cave 16, it is the Kailasa Temple, and it is arguably the most breathtaking and confounding structure on the face of the earth. To stand at the precipice and look down upon it is to witness an act of architectural alchemy. You are not looking at a building in the conventional sense. You are looking at a space where a mountain used to be. This is not a temple that was constructed brick by brick, block by block from the ground up. It is a temple that was revealed, unleashed from a single monolithic block of solid basalt rock, carved from the top down in a process of staggering, almost supernatural reverse engineering. It is the single largest monolithic sculpture in the world. The courtyard it sits in is 82 meters by 46 meters, with the central tower rising nearly 30 meters into the sky. That's a structure roughly the size of the Parthenon in Athens, not built, but excavated. Everything you see, the towering central shrine, the intricate subsidiary chapels, the life-sized elephant statues, the delicate bridges connecting different levels, the pillared halls, the elaborate friezes depicting scenes from the Hindu epics, is all part of the same original piece of mountain. There are no joints, no mortar, no seams. There is only one stone, an entire cathedral, sculpted, not built. The level of detail is bewildering. Every square inch of the temple teems with life. Gods and goddesses, celestial nymphs and fearsome guardians writhe across the rock walls. These are not crude reliefs. They are high-fidelity, three-dimensional sculptures, rendered with a grace and dynamism that seems impossible to achieve with a simple hammer and chisel. As you descend into the courtyard, the sheer verticality of the surrounding rock walls from which this masterpiece was liberated closes in. It feels less like a place of human construction and more like a geological miracle, a place where the mountain itself woke up and decided to pray. According to mainstream archaeology and history, this monolithic marvel was commissioned by King Krishna I of the Rashtrakuta dynasty, somewhere around the year 760 AD. The story is a testament to human will, faith, and artistic vision. For generations, we have been told that thousands of sculptors and laborers descended upon this mountain with the most basic of tools: iron chisels, heavy hammers, and pointed picks. The accepted theory posits a master plan of unparalleled genius. The architects, it is said, began at the very top of the hill. They first had to quarry down, creating 3 massive trenches in the rock to isolate a huge, standalone block that would eventually become the temple complex. This initial quarrying was the most brutal phase, a process of relentlessly pounding away at one of the hardest stones on the planet. Once this central monolith was defined, the true artistry began.
Working from the top down, the sculptors are said to have started with the highest point of the main tower, the shikhara. They carved its ornate capstone, then worked their way down, shaping the roof, then the walls. As they moved lower, they hollowed out the interior, creating chambers, sanctuaries, and halls, all while simultaneously sculpting the exterior. The pillars you see were not erected. They were what was left behind as the surrounding rock was painstakingly chipped away. The floor of the temple was the very last thing to be revealed. This top-down method meant that the builders never needed scaffolding, a clever and practical solution for such a monumental task. The timeline presented for this colossal undertaking is by any measure breathtakingly short. Most scholars suggest the entire project, from the first cut to the final polish, was completed in a period of just 18 to 20 years. This timeline is based primarily on the reign of the commissioning king and stylistic analysis. It presents a picture of a society capable of mobilizing immense manpower with hyper-efficient organization, all driven by a singular, powerful religious devotion. The Kailasa temple, in this view, is the ultimate expression of 8th century human ingenuity and endurance. It is a story of man conquering mountain, of faith made manifest through sheer, unrelenting effort. But what if that story, as elegant as it is, simply does not hold up to scrutiny? What if the Kailasa temple is a monument that presents us with a series of startling and profound impossibilities? The moment one moves past the initial awe and begins to apply cold, hard logic and mathematics to the mainstream narrative, the entire explanation begins to fracture. Let us begin with the sheer volume of rock that was removed. Conservative estimates suggest that to create the temple and its courtyard, at least 400,000 tons of dense basalt rock had to be excavated and removed. Let us accept the 18-year timeline proposed by historians. An 18-year project, assuming the workers labored 12 hours a day, 365 days a year with no days off for festivals, monsoons, or rest, means they would have had to remove roughly 60 tons of rock every single day. That is 5 tons of rock every hour. Or, to put it another way, nearly 100 kilograms of solid basalt rock every single minute for 18 years straight. And this was to be achieved with nothing more than hand tools? Basalt is an incredibly hard igneous rock with a compressive strength similar to that of modern high-performance concrete. The idea of removing 5 tons of it every hour using only muscle power and soft iron chisels that would constantly need to be reforged is not just difficult to imagine, it verges on the physically impossible. A modern construction company, equipped with pneumatic drills, diamond-tipped saws, and explosives, would find such a project a significant challenge. To suggest it was done by hand in under 2 decades defies all reasonable logistical analysis. Then there is the mystery of the missing mountain. Where did the 400,000 tons of rock go? An excavation of this magnitude would produce a mountain of debris, yet there are no spoil heaps, no vast quarries filled with rubble anywhere in the vicinity of the Ellora Caves. The landscape is clean. The 400,000 tons of rock, an amount equivalent to the weight of over 1,000 fully loaded jumbo jets, seem to have vanished. This is not a minor detail. It is a colossal logistical anomaly that the mainstream explanation simply ignores. How do you make a mountain of rubble disappear without a trace? Beyond the brute force of the excavation, there is the question of unparalleled precision. The top-down construction method meant the entire, incredibly complex 3-dimensional structure had to be perfectly visualized and planned before the first chisel ever touched the stone. There was zero margin for error. If a sculptor made a mistake carving a pillar on an upper level, he couldn't simply replace the stone. One wrong move, one crack, one miscalculation could have compromised a critical structural element dozens of meters below, rendering the entire project a failure. The architects were not just building, they were performing a flawless 18-year-long surgical operation on a mountain. How did they maintain such perfect symmetry and alignment while working their way down? How did they carve out complex interior rooms, right-angled tunnels, and intricate drainage systems, all with perfect foresight from the outside in? Modern architects would rely on GPS, laser surveying, and complex computer-aided design programs to even attempt such a feat. What system of planning and measurement did these 8th century builders possess that allowed for such godlike precision? The official narrative offers no answer. It simply asks us to accept it as an act of undocumented genius, a genius that appears to surpass our own technological capabilities in many respects. The temple stands in defiance of its own explanation. When the official story creates more questions than answers, we are forced to look for alternative paradigms. The evidence carved into the rock of Kailasa demands that we consider possibilities that stretch the boundaries of our accepted historical framework. One of the most compelling theories revolves around the idea of a lost, sophisticated technology. This is not to suggest extraterrestrial intervention, but rather to propose that our ancient ancestors may have possessed a deeper understanding of the physical world than we currently give them credit for. Could they have mastered a technology that has since been lost to the sands of time? Ancient texts from the Indian subcontinent, the Vedas and Puranas, are filled with descriptions of incredible devices, or vimanas, and powerful weapons. What if they also contained knowledge of more practical, constructive technologies? Consider the possibility of acoustic or vibrational technology. The idea that sound can affect physical matter is now being explored by modern science through fields like cymetics. Is it possible that the builders of Kailasa possessed a tool that used resonant frequencies to destabilize the molecular structure of the rock? Such a device could theoretically turn hard basalt into a substance as soft as clay, or even disintegrate it into a fine dust. This would explain everything. It would explain the incredible speed of the excavation. It would explain the fine, almost machined finish on many of the surfaces. And most importantly, it would solve the mystery of the missing 400,000 tons of rock. The rock wasn't carted away. It was perhaps vaporized or turned to dust and simply blown away by the wind. This may sound like science fiction, but it is a hypothesis that elegantly resolves the major physical and logistical impossibilities of the site.
Another powerful theory challenges the very timeline we have been given. What if the Kailasa temple is far, far older than the 8th century AD? It is a common practice in history for a conquering king or a new dynasty to claim the magnificent structures of their predecessors as their own. They would often add their own inscriptions and stylistic flourishes to a pre-existing monument. Is it possible that King Krishna I did not build the temple, but rather found it, perhaps in a state of disrepair, and undertook a massive project of restoration and modification? This would mean the core structure was carved by a much older, unknown civilization over a far longer period of time. This neatly solves the impossible 18-year construction window. Perhaps the temple was the work of centuries, a slow, methodical creation by a people whose history is no longer remembered. The Rashtrakuta dynasty's contribution may have been significant, but it was an addition to, not the creation of, this monolithic wonder. This would place the original architects in a deeper, more mysterious period of antiquity, a lost chapter of human history whose only surviving evidence is the impossible structures they left behind. The Kailasa temple does not exist in a vacuum. It is perhaps the most spectacular example, but it is part of a global pattern of ancient megalithic and monolithic engineering that consistently defies our understanding. When we widen our perspective, we see its echoes across the world. Thousands of miles away in the highlands of Ethiopia, we find the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela. Here too, magnificent structures were not built up, but carved down into the volcanic tuff created as voids in the living rock. In the deserts of Jordan lies the city of Petra, with its astonishing facades carved directly into the sandstone cliffs. In Lycia, in modern-day Turkey, we find elaborate tombs meticulously sculpted from the faces of mountains. Are these all just incredible coincidences of architectural evolution, or are they hinting at something more profound? Could these be the scattered remnants, the cultural fingerprints of a worldwide, highly advanced civilization from a remote past? A civilization that had mastered the science of working with stone on a scale that we find unimaginable today. They may have had different artistic styles and worshiped different gods, but the core technology, the fundamental understanding of how to shape the very crust of the earth to their will, may have stemmed from a common source, a shared inheritance of forgotten knowledge. Kailasa, then, might be more than just a temple. It might be a library where the books are made of stone, and the language is an impossible feat of engineering. It challenges our linear, progressive view of history. It suggests that the past was not necessarily more primitive than the present. It implies that great peaks of technological and scientific understanding may have been reached, only to be lost in the cataclysms and dark ages of human history. The temple is a silent, immovable testament to the fact that we may not be the pinnacle of human achievement. We may simply be the ones who have forgotten the most. We are left standing in the shadow of an impossibility. The Kailasa temple is a paradox in stone. The official story asks us to believe in a feat of manual labor that defies mathematics and logistics. The physical evidence before our eyes suggests a level of technological and engineering prowess that should not have existed in the 8th century. It is a structure that is both profoundly ancient and, in its ambition, shockingly futuristic. It is a message from the past that we lack the vocabulary to fully understand. The temple at Ellora forces us to confront an uncomfortable but exhilarating truth: that the map of our own history may contain vast, uncharted territories. It stands as a monument not only to faith, but to a forgotten science, a lost potential that lies dormant within the human story. It is a silent, immovable testament to the fact that we may not be the pinnacle of human achievement. We may simply be the ones who have forgotten the most. And as we gaze upon this impossible artifact, we must ask ourselves the ultimate question. If our ancestors were capable of this, of literally sculpting mountains into cathedrals, what other secrets, what other forgotten truths lie not written in fragile scrolls, but in the very bones of the earth itself, waiting to be rediscovered?
Deep within the arid plains of Upper Egypt, where the sun beats down with an almost supernatural intensity, there stands a monument of staggering grace, the Temple of Hathor at Dendera. It is one of the best-preserved temple complexes in all of Egypt, a sprawling library of stone dedicated to the goddess of love, beauty, music, and motherhood. Its grand halls and colonnades are a testament to the faith and artistry of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a final brilliant flare of pharaonic culture before the coming of Rome. The walls here are alive with a universe of intricate carvings. Gods and pharaohs engage in timeless rituals, their stoic profiles etched for eternity. Hieroglyphs flow like sacred rivers, telling stories of creation, cosmic battles, and the soul's journey into the afterlife. To walk these halls is to walk through the mind of ancient Egypt, to feel the weight of its millennia-long history. But to find Dendera's greatest secret, one must leave the sunlit courts behind. One must descend. Down narrow, suffocating stairwells, deeper and deeper into the foundations of the temple, into the cool, silent darkness of the subterranean crypts. The air here is thick, still, and heavy with the scent of ancient stone and the dust of ages. These hidden chambers, sealed away from the public eye for centuries, were the most sacred and secret places in the entire complex. It was here that the temple's most precious ceremonial objects were stored. And it is here, carved into the limestone walls of a long, narrow chamber, that we find an image so baffling, so utterly out of place, that it challenges the very foundations of our understanding of the ancient world. Before us is a series of reliefs that are, at first glance, unmistakably Egyptian. We see figures in familiar postures, wearing traditional attire, but our eyes are inevitably drawn to the central motif, a large, bulbous object, transparent and pear-shaped, elegantly held aloft by a pillar and supported by human figures. Inside this bulb, a long, undulating serpent snakes its way from a lotus flower at the base to the very tip. A thick cord, like a cable, emerges from the lotus flower socket and runs to a small square box upon which sits the god of the air, Shu. At the base of the entire apparatus is the Djed pillar, an iconic Egyptian symbol, but here it seems to serve a more technical purpose. It appears to be the power source, the very anchor of the device. The scene is repeated, a gallery of inexplicable technology. The objects bear an uncanny and undeniable resemblance to a modern invention, the electric lamp, specifically a type of early gas discharge tube. The resemblance is so striking that it stops you in your tracks. The mind struggles to reconcile what it sees with what it knows to be possible. We are told this is a primitive culture, one of bronze tools and divine superstition. Yet here, etched into the walls of their most sacred space, is what looks for all the world like a blueprint for a sophisticated piece of electrical equipment. Now, for any Egyptologist, the meaning of these reliefs is a closed case, a matter of established academic consensus. There is no mystery here, only mythology. The mainstream interpretation asserts that we are not looking at technology, but at a complex and beautiful symbolic representation of Egyptian creation myths. According to this view, the large bulb is not a bulb at all. It is the celestial womb of the sky goddess Nut, from which the sun is born each morning. The long, winding snake inside is not a filament, but the god Harsumptus, a primordial serpent deity associated with creation and the rising sun. The lotus flower from which the serpent emerges is a classic Egyptian symbol of birth and regeneration. So, the image depicts the birth of the serpent god from the lotus flower, a powerful metaphor for the first dawn and the creation of the cosmos. The Djed pillar, that strange ribbed column supporting the scene, is universally recognized as the symbolic backbone of the god Osiris. It represents stability, endurance, and resurrection. Its inclusion here, we are told,
is to provide the mythological stability necessary for this act of cosmic creation. The cable is simply the stem of the lotus, connecting the flower to the earth. The figures surrounding the bulb are gods and priests, facilitating this divine birth through ritual. Every single element of the carving, scholars insist, can be explained through the well-documented lexicon of Egyptian mythology. It is a story, not a schematic, a prayer in stone, not a patent application. And to suggest otherwise is to indulge in pseudoscience, to see patterns where none exist, and to misunderstand the profoundly symbolic nature of the ancient Egyptian mind. For decades, this has been the final word. The Dendera light, they say, is a phantom, a trick of the light, a modern projection onto an ancient canvas. It is a case of pareidolia, where our technologically saturated minds see what they want to see, not what is truly there. The case, for all intents and purposes, is closed. But is it? What if the neat, tidy explanation of mythology leaves too many questions unanswered? What if the official narrative, while plausible, simply fails to account for a collection of anomalies that, when viewed together, begin to unravel the entire story? The first, and perhaps most persistent problem, is one of simple logistics. The tombs and temples of Egypt, including these deep, windowless crypts at Dendera, are filled with some of the most detailed and brilliantly colored art ever created. These masterpieces were executed in absolute, pitch-black darkness. The conventional explanation is that the Egyptians illuminated their workspaces with olive oil lamps.
But this explanation carries a significant flaw: soot. Oil lamps produce smoke, a greasy, black residue that would have coated the ceilings and upper walls, obscuring or destroying the very paintings the artists were creating. Yet, in many of the most beautifully preserved tombs in the Valley of the Kings, and here in the Dendera crypt, the ceilings are pristine, clean. There is a conspicuous and mysterious absence of soot. Some have proposed that the Egyptians used a system of polished copper or bronze mirrors to reflect sunlight deep into the tombs. While this is ingenious, physicists and engineers who have tested the theory have found it to be impractical. The amount of light lost with each reflection is substantial, and directing that light around the sharp corners and down the long corridors of a typical tomb would have been functionally impossible. The result would have been, at best, a dim, useless twilight. So, how did they do it? How did they work for hours on end, with the precision of master surgeons, in chambers buried deep within the earth, without a reliable, bright, and clean source of light? This fundamental problem hangs over Egyptology, an unanswered question that creates the perfect environment for a radical new theory. Beyond the practical problem of soot, we must return to the visual evidence on the wall. We are asked to believe this is purely symbolic, but Egyptian art, for all its stylization, follows a strict and consistent set of rules known as canon. Proportions, postures, and symbols were repeated with incredible fidelity for 3,000 years. The Dendera reliefs break with that canon in subtle but disturbing ways. Look closer at the bulb. It is depicted as being transparent. We can clearly see the snake inside it. This is not typical of Egyptian art, which generally portrayed objects from their most characteristic angle, not in cross-section. The object has a distinct, defined shape, a socketed base, and a tapering neck. This is not a vague representation of a womb. It is a specific, manufactured object. Now consider the filament. Why a snake? Yes, the snake is a symbol of divinity and creation, but in a gas discharge tube, such as a Crookes tube, the plasma arc that forms inside often takes on a serpentine, snake-like shape as it flows from the cathode to the anode. Is it possible the Egyptians were not drawing a symbol, but were instead drawing exactly what they saw when their device was activated? A glowing, ethereal serpent of light
trapped in a glass prison.
And then there is the Djed pillar. Its identification as the backbone of Osiris is correct from a mythological standpoint, but we cannot ignore its shape. It is, for all intents and purposes, a perfect depiction of a high-voltage insulator. The stacked, ribbed design is functionally identical to the ceramic insulators we use today on power lines to prevent electricity from arcing to the ground. In electrical engineering, this shape is ideal for increasing the surface path, maximizing resistance, and preventing electrical breakdown. Is it a coincidence that the symbol the Egyptians chose for stability just happens to be the perfect shape for a high-voltage electrical component? And why is it shown here, directly wired into the base of the lamp, exactly where you would expect the power source or insulator to be? The collection of coincidences begins to strain credulity. A bulb-shaped object, a serpentine filament, a socket, a cable, a power box, and a high-voltage insulator, all explained away as individual mythological symbols that just happen to assemble themselves into a perfect diagram of a sophisticated electrical device. At what point do we stop calling it coincidence and start calling it evidence? This is where we leave the comfortable shores of orthodox history and venture into more speculative waters. A growing number of engineers, independent researchers, and alternative historians have proposed a daring theory that the Dendera reliefs are not a myth, but a memory, a schematic diagram of a functioning electrical lighting system known to the ancient Egyptian priesthood. The core of this theory is that the object depicted is a form of Crookes tube. A Crookes tube is an early experimental electrical discharge tube. When the air is pumped out and a high voltage is applied, the remaining gas inside ionizes and begins to glow, creating a beautiful ethereal light. The snake in this model is the glowing plasma beam. The lotus flower is the socket holding the electrodes. The Djed pillar is the source of the high voltage static electricity needed to power it. But where would they get the electricity? The idea of electricity in the ancient world is often dismissed out of hand. But is that dismissal premature? In 1938, not far from Egypt, in modern-day Iraq, a strange clay pot was discovered. Dated to around 200 BCE, it contained a copper cylinder surrounding an iron rod insulated by an asphalt plug. It is known today as the Baghdad battery. When filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or grape juice, this simple device produces a small but steady electrical current. While mainstream archaeology often labels it as a vessel for storing sacred scrolls, replicas have proven that it works as a galvanic cell. It can generate electricity. The Baghdad battery proves that the fundamental principle of generating electricity was not unknown in the ancient world. Could the Egyptian priesthood have possessed a more advanced version of this knowledge? Proponents of the electrical theory suggest the Djed pillar was not a battery, but a device for generating high-voltage static electricity, perhaps a form of Wimshurst machine or a Van de Graaff generator, operated by priests. The reliefs show the cable from the lamp connected to a box with a figure representing air seated upon it, perhaps symbolizing that the device drew its power from the atmosphere. It sounds like science fiction, but the visual evidence carved into the stone remains stubbornly, persistently technological. Engineers have noted that the figures supporting the bulb are holding it with great care, and their hands are insulated in specific ways, almost as if they are aware of the dangers of high voltage. The small figure offering knives near the lamp's energy stream has been interpreted not as a threat, but as a symbolic warning of the device's power, the cutting force of electricity. Every detail, when viewed through a technological lens instead of a mythological one, suddenly clicks into place with a terrifying and awe-inspiring logic.
If the priests of Dendera did indeed possess a working knowledge of electricity, the implications are staggering. This was not an isolated novelty, it was the product of a sophisticated scientific tradition. A technology like this would require a deep understanding of metallurgy,
glass blowing, chemistry, and physics, knowledge we are told the ancient Egyptians simply did not possess. It forces us to reevaluate everything we think we know about them. We see them as pyramid builders, but perhaps we should also see them as physicists. We see them as scribes, but perhaps they were also electrical engineers. The Dendera light, if real, would be a phantom from a future that somehow happened in our distant past. It suggests that our current technological age is not the first of its kind. It suggests a cycle of history, of great knowledge found and then catastrophically lost. This single carving could be a vital clue, a missing piece in a much larger puzzle. It connects to a global pattern of ancient anomalies, the impossible stonework of PUMA PUNKU, the astronomical precision of the Great Pyramid, the mysterious Antikythera mechanism. All of these artifacts whisper the same story, of a lost chapter in human history, a time when an advanced civilization flourished on this planet, leaving behind only faint, enigmatic traces of its incredible achievements. The Dendera light, in this context, is not just a lamp. It is a beacon, shining a light back into the deepest abyss of forgotten time, illuminating the ghost of a civilization that we are only just beginning to recognize. We are left standing in the silent dark of the Dendera crypt, caught between two irreconcilable worlds. One is the world of established history, a comfortable and well-documented narrative of myth and symbol. The other is a world of tantalizing possibility, of lost science and forgotten power, a world that exists only in the spaces between the accepted facts. The carvings on the wall remain silent witnesses, offering no easy answers. Their meaning is shrouded in the mists of time, their purpose lost to the shifting sands. They force us to confront a profound and unsettling question. Are we looking at the symbolic birth of a serpent god from a lotus flower? A beautiful but primitive myth. Or are we looking at a user's manual for a lost technology? A technology that mastered the very essence of light itself, powered by a knowledge that has since been utterly and completely erased from human memory. If the high priests of Egypt truly did conquer the darkness in their deepest sanctuaries, what other fundamental forces of the universe did they command? And what other blueprints of their impossible science lie waiting, hidden in plain sight, dismissed as mere myth, ready to be understood once more?
Deep beneath the emerald skin of the Irish countryside, there is a place where time itself seems to hesitate. To enter the passage at Newgrange is to leave the 21st century behind, and to step into a silence that is more than 5,000 years old. The air is cool and heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient stone. Massive, unmortared megaliths, each weighing many tons, form the walls and ceiling of a narrow corridor leading to a central cruciform chamber. They fit together with a precision that modern engineering would struggle to replicate, holding back the immense pressure of the earthen mound above. This is a womb within the world, a place of profound darkness and stillness. For 50 centuries, this chamber has held its secrets, guarding a purpose that we are only now beginning to comprehend. The accepted narrative, the one you will find in textbooks and academic journals, is both simple and profound. Newgrange is a passage tomb, a Neolithic cathedral built to honor the dead and perhaps to venerate the cycle of life itself. It is a masterpiece of Stone Age astronomy. For one brief period, on the shortest days of the year, the winter solstice, a singular event occurs. As the sun rises over the distant horizon, a narrow beam of light penetrates a small opening above the main entrance, the roof box. This golden shaft of light pushes back the ancient darkness, slowly, deliberately, creeping down the 19-meter passage to illuminate the floor of the central chamber. The event lasts for a mere 17 minutes.
It is a celestial spectacle, a stunning confirmation that its builders possessed a sophisticated knowledge of the sun's path. They were, we are told, farmer priests, marking the death of the old year and the promise of the new. A celestial clock designed to reassure them that the light and life would return. A beautiful, poetic, and satisfying explanation. And yet, it is an incomplete one, because the architects of Newgrange were not only masters of light and stone, they were masters of something far more ephemeral, far more mysterious. They were masters of sound. What happens when the human voice is used within this precisely constructed stone chamber is something that mainstream archaeology has been reluctant to address. When a low, resonant tone is produced, the air itself begins to thrum. The stone seems to come alive. Researchers in the field of archaeoacoustics, a discipline that studies the intersection of sound and ancient spaces, have discovered something extraordinary. The chamber at Newgrange, and many others like it across Neolithic Europe, was built with a specific resonant frequency. The stone itself is tuned. The frequency is approximately 110 Hz. This isn't just a random acoustic quirk. A sustained vocal tone at this frequency creates what is known as a standing wave, where the sound energy doesn't dissipate, but is instead amplified, seeming to emanate from the very stones themselves. The air vibrates, the floor hums, and the person creating the sound can feel it resonating deep within their own body, within their very bones. But the true significance of this frequency is not found in the stone, but in the human mind. Neuroscientists have observed that exposure to a sustained frequency in the 110 Hz range can have a profound effect on brainwave activity. It can coax the human brain to shift from the alert, conscious state of beta, down through the relaxed, creative state of alpha, and into the elusive theta state.
The theta state is the twilight realm of our consciousness. It is the state we experience in deep meditation, in hypnosis, and on the very edge of sleep. It is a doorway to the subconscious, a state associated with heightened intuition, creative insight, and even shamanic journeying. The builders of Newgrange, it seems, were not just creating a tomb to house the dead. They were building a sophisticated neurological instrument designed to alter the consciousness of the living. The chamber was not a passive resting place. It was an active technology, a machine for accessing other modes of perception. Think of it not as a cathedral, but as a colossal, stone-built tuning fork, engineered to make the human mind resonate with the fabric of the chamber itself. The solstice alignment, then, may not have been the primary purpose, but rather a catalyst. Imagine the scene. Ancient priests or shamans gathered in the pitch blackness of the central chamber. They begin a low, guttural chant, their voices finding that perfect resonant sweet spot. The air grows thick with sound, the stones vibrating, their own bodies becoming instruments in a subterranean orchestra. And at that precise moment, as their minds are poised on the threshold of another reality, the first ray of the solstice sun pierces the darkness. Light and sound intertwined. A multi-sensory experience designed to trigger a profound, transformative state of consciousness. Was this how they communed with their ancestors? How they traveled to the spirit world? How they sought visions to guide their people? The tomb for the dead was, perhaps, a gateway for the living. This was not an isolated miracle of engineering. Travel south, across the Mediterranean, to the tiny island of Malta. Here, carved not into an artificial mound, but deep into the living limestone bedrock, is a structure that pushes this forgotten science even further. The Hal-Saflieni Hypogeum, a subterranean labyrinth of chambers, halls, and passages, spread across 3 levels, descending more than 10 meters below the surface.
It is a negative architecture, a sculpture carved from the void, estimated to be over 5,000 years old, contemporary with the Great Mounds of Ireland. Officially, it is a necropolis, a collective burial ground where the remains of some 7,000 individuals were found. But like Newgrange, the hypogeum holds a deeper acoustic secret. Within its second level is a small, unassuming space known as the oracle chamber. It has a small, hemispherical niche carved into the wall, just at head height. The acoustics in this particular spot are breathtaking. If a man, speaking in a low, resonant voice, directs his words into this niche, the sound is magnified 100-fold. It becomes a deep, booming, disembodied voice that echoes not just within the chamber, but throughout the entire multi-level complex. The stone itself seems to speak, carrying the words to every corner of the subterranean world. But here is the truly baffling anomaly. The effect only works for voices within a specific low frequency range, a range typical of the male voice. Higher frequency sounds, like those of a typical female voice, produce no such resonance. They remain flat, unamplified. This is not a natural fluke of geology. This is deliberate, sophisticated, gender-specific acoustic engineering. Why? What possible purpose could this serve? The name oracle chamber is a modern invention, but perhaps it's more accurate than we know. Imagine a priestess standing in a lower chamber, posing a question to the gods or the ancestors, and from the very rock around her, a deep, powerful, disembodied voice responds, seemingly from another world. The psychological impact would be immense, a direct and awe-inspiring confirmation of the divine. This acoustic specialization suggests a level of understanding that is profoundly at odds with our image of the Neolithic world. It implies that these builders not only understood resonance, but could manipulate it with surgical precision. They could filter sound, channeling and amplifying certain frequencies while silencing others. They were sculpting with sound waves just as skillfully as they sculpted with stone tools. Across Europe, from the cairns of Scotland to the dolmens of France, we find echoes of this lost art. Burial chambers that hum, stone circles that focus and amplify sound. A consistent pattern, a sonic signature left by a civilization that viewed sound not merely as something to be heard, but as a fundamental force of creation, a tool for interacting with the very architecture of reality. They seem to have understood a fundamental principle of physics that we are only now rediscovering, that everything, from the smallest atom to the largest galaxy, is in a state of vibration. They built their most sacred structures to harmonize with those vibrations.
And this quest for harmony was not limited to the vibrations of the earth. It reached for the grand, silent music of the cosmos itself. To see the next stage of this forgotten science, we must travel east to the shores of the Bay of Bengal in India, to a monument that is not buried in darkness, but stands brilliant in the sun, the great temple of Konark. Built in the 13th century, it is, on the surface, a breathtaking work of religious art. The entire complex is conceived as a colossal chariot for Surya, the Hindu god of the sun. It is pulled by 7 exquisitely carved horses representing the days of the week and stands upon 24 massive wheels representing the hours of the day. Every inch of its surface is covered in intricate carvings depicting deities, celestial beings, and scenes of daily life. It is a poem in stone, a testament to the devotion of its builders. Mainstream history and archaeology classify it as one of the grandest temples of its era, a pinnacle of Kalingan architecture. Its purpose was worship, ritual, and the celebration of the divine power of the sun. It was a center of pilgrimage,
a symbol of a king's power and piety. This is all true, but it is only part of the story. Because like the chambers of Newgrange, the Konark Temple is also a machine. Not a machine for altering consciousness with sound, but a machine for charting the cosmos with light and shadow. It is one of the most accurate and sophisticated timekeeping devices ever created by the hand of man. The 24 giant wheels, each nearly 10 feet in diameter, are the most obvious clue. They are not merely symbolic decoration on a divine chariot. Each wheel is a functional, perfectly calibrated sundial. The design is genius in its complexity and simplicity. Each wheel has 8 major spokes and 8 minor spokes, dividing the day into 16 segments of 90 minutes each. The rim of the wheel is adorned with a series of beads, 30 in total, between each pair of major spokes. These tiny beads allow an observer to measure time with incredible accuracy. As the sun moves across the sky, the shadow of the central axle falls upon the wheel. By observing which spoke the shadow is on and which bead along the rim it is closest to, one could accurately tell the time down to a single minute. 24 sundials, each one a monumental clock, charting the passage of the day with a precision that would not be matched by mechanical clocks in Europe for centuries. But the genius of Konark's architects went far beyond telling the time of day. The entire temple is a vast astronomical observatory, oriented with breathtaking precision along the east-west axis. The grand design was such that, on the solstices and equinoxes, the very first rays of the rising sun would travel through a succession of gates and doorways, finally striking the principal idol of Surya that was once housed in the main sanctum, bathing it in divine light. The very architecture of the temple was designed to perform a celestial drama, marking the turning points of the year. The 7 horses are not just the 7 days of the week, but are also interpreted by some to represent the 7 colors of the spectrum, another nod to the properties of light. This was not the work of people with a rudimentary understanding of the sky. This was the work of masters. It required generations of naked eye observation, complex geometric and mathematical calculations, and an almost supernatural skill in engineering and masonry to execute. They were embedding cosmic cycles into the very fabric of their most sacred structure. The temple was not just for the sun god, it was an active participant with him. It was an instrument designed to resonate with the grand, silent rhythms of the solar system. Here then, we see the 2 sides of the same incredible coin. In the dark, earthen mounds of Ireland, a technology of sound designed to turn the human mind inward to explore the interior cosmos, and in the sun-drenched stone of India, a technology of light and shadow designed to map the exterior cosmos with divine precision. Are these 2 traditions, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, truly distinct? Or do they both whisper of a single, unified, and now forgotten worldview? A deep, profound understanding that the universe, from the firing of a neuron to the orbit of a planet, operates on principles of frequency, resonance, and harmony.
Our ancestors were not just passive observers of this cosmic symphony. They were actively trying to join the orchestra. They built immense, powerful instruments of stone, not to play music that could be heard with the ears, but to create a harmony that could be felt in the soul, and a precision that could be seen by the eye. They believed, it seems, that by aligning their sacred spaces with the frequencies of the earth and the cycles of the heavens, they could align themselves with the fundamental creative forces of the universe itself. This was not religion as we know it, a system of belief and faith. This was a form of applied physics, a spiritual technology. We stand today amidst the ruins of their incredible machines, marveling at the craftsmanship, calling them tombs and temples, while remaining deaf and blind to their true purpose. We see the what, the resonant chamber, the celestial clock,
but we have tragically, completely lost the why. What was the ultimate goal of these monumental undertakings? Was it simply to create a sense of awe during a ritual? Or to know when to plant the crops? Or was it something more? Something so profound that it required this immense, multi-generational investment of time, resources, and esoteric knowledge? What did they know about the relationship between consciousness, stone, sound, and the stars that we have forgotten? It forces us to ask a far more unsettling question. If they could engineer stone to manipulate the human mind with sound and map the heavens with flawless precision, what other forces of nature had they truly mastered? What happens when we find evidence that they could manipulate not just sound and light, but the very stone itself with an ease that defies our understanding of the laws of physics? The earth holds its secrets in stone. From the windswept hills of Anatolia, where the T-shaped pillars of Göbekli Tepe stare silently at the heavens, to the staggering heights of the Peruvian Andes, where the Cyclopean walls of SACSAYHUAMÁN fit together with impossible, mortarless precision, we trace this thread across the globe. To the Giza Plateau in Egypt, where a perfect geometry of pyramids maps the stars with an accuracy that defies their accepted age, and onward to the Indian subcontinent, where the Kailasa temple was not built, but carved, liberated from a single colossal mountain. Seen in isolation, each is a monument to the genius of a specific culture, a testament to human ingenuity rising independently again and again across the continents. The established narrative tells a comforting story of parallel development. The Egyptians, the Incas, the ancient peoples of India and Turkey all are credited with inventing their own sophisticated techniques, their own astronomical knowledge, their own sacred architecture, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. We are told that any similarities in their methods or beliefs are mere coincidence, a chance convergence of brilliant but disconnected human minds arriving at similar solutions to similar problems. It is a story of many separate streams of knowledge, each finding its own path to greatness. This is the history we find in our textbooks, the foundation of our understanding of the ancient world. But when we stand back and view the earth from a distance, the streams begin to merge into a single flowing river. The theory of coincidence begins to feel insufficient. How many coincidences must we accept before coincidence itself becomes a mathematical impossibility? We are asked to believe it is a coincidence that cultures on opposite sides of the planet with no known contact both used polygonal masonry, fitting massive irregular stones together like a jigsaw puzzle. A coincidence that their most sacred sites are so often aligned with cardinal directions and celestial events, particularly the slow 26,000-year cycle of precessional wobble, a cycle that modern science only recently mastered. It is a coincidence that they engineered structures with a precision that, in some cases, we would struggle to replicate today. The questions multiply. We find a shared architectural language, a common blueprint whispered on every continent. The mainstream view, so neat and orderly, simply cannot account for this global pattern. It leaves the most profound anomalies unanswered. What if the story is not one of separate streams, but of a single, ancient source, an immense fountain of knowledge from which all later civilizations drank? This is the theory of a lost progenitor civilization, a global culture that flourished in a forgotten epoch of history, a culture that mapped the earth, understood the cosmos, and mastered the science of stone and consciousness. Perhaps the legendary tales of Atlantis, of Rama, of a golden age before the Great Flood are not myths at all.
but the fragmented memories of this common ancestor. In this light, the ancient Egyptians and the pre-Incan builders were not inventors, but inheritors. They were the heirs to a legacy of science and wisdom, striving to replicate a blueprint left behind by a civilization that preceded them. These incredible sites are not the dawn of sophisticated knowledge, but the twilight, the last magnificent echoes of a world we have forgotten. From Turkey to Peru, from Egypt to India, the pattern is no longer a collection of curiosities. It is undeniable. The puzzle pieces scattered across the globe begin to form a coherent image. These temples, pyramids, and geoglyphs are not isolated monuments. They are waypoints on a map that leads us back not just in time, but to a lost paradigm of human potential, a golden age of wisdom. As we stand before these enigmas, built by our ancestors, we are not just looking at old stones. We are looking at the remnants of a different story of humanity. We are forced to conclude that the official history of our past is far from complete. We are a species with amnesia, living amongst the ruins of a world far more advanced and mysterious than we have ever been told. This ancient blueprint reveals that the knowledge was not lost. It was encoded. It was preserved in stone, in myth, and in the very mathematics of the earth and sky, waiting for a future generation to rediscover the key. It seems we are that generation, and as we begin to unlock these ancient secrets, we are confronted with the most profound question of all. If this was our past, what does it mean for our future? What else might we be capable of if we only dared to remember?